Hello everybody, welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Gran Turismo open much better than expected. Not by a whole lot, but still better than expected. And also even bumping heads with Barbie, which almost took the number one spot once again, and who knows, when the actuals come out, you may very well see it take the number one spot. Both Barbie and Gran Turismo making $17 million each. Only about $200,000 right now is separating them, and so we'll find out over the course of the next couple of days. Either way, though, Barbie is still doing incredibly well box office-wise, and Gran Turismo is in a position where, hey, if the positive word of mouth on the film continues, and if it is able to hold as the weeks go on with the various other films set to come out, nothing really major set, but still films that are going to cause some type of competition ultimately. When it comes to how we as consumers spend our dollar, we'll have to, of course, wait and see what actually happens with that. But good news so far, starting off for Gran Turismo, and a very solid movie that I think deserves very much your money and your support. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about how Blue Beetle has fallen off the map. Yes, even though it has a 49% hold for 1 week to week 2, from week 1 to week 2, it is still not looking all that great for it because, hey, it's a Warner Brothers film. It costs a lot more than what it should have actually cost to make, and ultimately no one is going to see it. So we'll talk about the projections on that and a plethora of other films. Before going further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, lap that fire button, and smash the rumble button as well. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with that bell notification on. That way you know every time a video or live stream goes live on the channel. So we start off with Tony, our good friend Tony over at Deadline, mentioning how Gran Turismo and Barbie are bumping heads with $17 million each. However, apparently Barbie is leading the National Cinema Day. It is National Cinema Day. If you are wanting to go see a movie or have been wanting to go see one, today is probably going to be the day. Many theaters across the country are participating. $4 tickets for pretty much everything. That actually even includes Fathom events. There is a Fathom event tonight. There is a showing of American Graffiti, I believe is the film that's being shown this weekend. And normally those tickets, you are not able to get your A-list. If you're an A-list member for AMC or really any of the subscription services, you really can't get those to cover it. But I checked that just the last couple of days actually, and those were also listed for $4. So hey, go ahead and check that out if there's a movie that you've been wanting to see. But starting off with Tony, we see with National Cinema Day today and all tickets for all movies, $4, a celebration which brings mixed emotions to those in the industry. Many are seeing Sony's Gran Turismo waving the checkered flag with around 17.3, I see what you did there, and 4.1 million on a Saturday that plummeted due to the fact that it was up against an $8.5 million Friday, chock full of 9 days of previews. So obviously that is going to have some impact on it, but still a $17 million opening weekend is still pretty good for a film like it. Warner Brothers is calling Barbie's sixth weekend at 17.1, while rivals show it at a 15.1 take after 5.3 million Saturday. That was 33% over its Friday. As we mentioned, Warners are irate over Sony's handling of preview box office accounting on Gran Turismo. Warners believe that Sony should back out all the non-Thursday previews out of Gran Turismo's Friday so that Barbie can be number one for a fifth time in a row. No Rival Studios' internal box office chart sees it that way. Where is Warner getting the logic that Barbie gets to a 17.1 million this weekend? Read on. It's all about National Cinema Day. So what's interesting here is you got these studios that are just fighting over each other. So not only do you have them fighting with their actors and fighting with their writers, but now you also have them fighting amongst one another on how to report the box office numbers. Now, what's interesting to me is that Tony, while talking about this and calling this out, I guarantee you he's not going to spill a lot of ink writing about those studios and their box office practices the same way that he did for, Sound of Freedom, right? Remember how he was constantly calling out Sound of Freedom's numbers and calling them dubious and consistently labeling them with all kinds of names, trying to clearly push people away from ever going to see it? Do you remember that? Because I remember, Tony. I have a long memory. And when it comes to this, Tony, let's just say, move on from yourself. So anyway, that is the numbers going on from Tony. Let's go to the numbers.com, which has been a lot more slower to upload data. By the way, I want to give a shout out to someone on my Discord server, Mobile Command, who is awesome. He has helped me out quite a bit in the past with some tech stuff, and he actually was able to teach me a method to basically have data scraping into my chart so that it will automatically update. I had some issues today though, because unfortunately the numbers is still having problems loading data and is still having problems loading, probably because with the box office now getting a lot more traffic in general and a lot more attention in general, the traffic to their website is probably bogging their servers down quite a bit. So I had to manually input some numbers today, but ultimately this past week has been pretty cool to see the numbers just update every single time I double checked my charting. But going to the actual charting here on the numbers, we can see Gran Turismo is indeed in the first place spot, $17.3 million opening weekend, despite the fact that there are some that are calling that to be, again, not true, or at the very least not fair because of them having an extended opening. But hey, Barbie, you were at the number one spot for a very, very long time. And even if you're not at the number one spot, guess what? You are still at a very, very strong second place. And you're also still seeing a 19% hold. So, Warner Brothers, just calm yourself down for a second. You've got a lot bigger problems to worry about, and it has a lot to do with Blue Beetle, which we'll get into in a second. But Gran Turismo 17.3 versus Barbie 17.1. That per theater ratio, as you can see, is a little bit higher for Barbie, but still strong showing nonetheless for what Gran Turismo has. Again, this is a movie that really has not gotten a whole lot of press, has not gotten a whole lot of attention. There has been a marketing campaign, but ultimately the marketing has not been very good. The trailers have not made the film seem all that compelling, and I went to go see it almost entirely because of my knowledge of the fact that Neil Blomkamp, who is the same director behind District 9, Elysium, and Chappie. District 9 is the only great film from him. The other two are kind of hit and miss in many ways. But also, number two reason why I went is because of the fact that Critical Drinker gave a very glowing and positive review of the film. And he is someone that knows Neil Blomkamp's work and was able to say very honestly, yeah, it's not anywhere close to District 9, but it's a heck of a lot better than the other films that he has done. So that is basically where you are with that. If you don't take my forward for it, go check out Critical Drinker's review instead. I think that he does a great job covering it. But the film is, I think, probably because of him in some way, and also because of some of the positive vibes surrounding the film, doing better than what had probably been expected. The big showing is going to be next weekend, because do we see this film fall off a cliff? Especially because they are going to be counting. If they're going to be counting those preview numbers, what that means is that though it might help them up front, it also means there's that chance that their week 2 box office ends up looking very, very bad, right? You might see over 50-60% drop. And for a film that's a little bit smaller like this, that would not be a good sign. But we'll have to wait and see. Barbie, still doing very well, getting very close to $600 million. It recently passed the Super Mario Brothers movie's domestic numbers, so it is the number one film domestically this year, and it is just a couple of days. And when I say couple of days, I mean basically just a couple of days away from becoming the biggest film of this year worldwide. It is very close to knocking Super Mario Brothers off, and it still has gas in the tank. Again, when you're still making $17 million a weekend, as it is right now in the States, and when you're still adding more and more money internationally, guess what? You're looking at 1.4 to 1.6 billion probably by the end of its run. It is just making money, and there's nothing that seems to be in the way of stopping it, at least at this point in time. Then we get to Blue Beetle. Now, Blue Beetle, domestically, 49% drop from week 1 to week 2. That's not the worst drop-off in the world, right? We have seen catastrophic drops for most superhero movies, right? They tend to drop in the 60s. The fact that this has only dropped 49% is definitely a positive sign. That being said, because its opening was as small as it was, right, in that $30 million range, and then this film's only adding 12.7 million in its second weekend. Its domestic is only at 46, so it hasn't even crossed 50 million. And based on the numbers that we're seeing, we're not likely going to see this film crack $200 million worldwide. And we'll go more so into the numbers there when we get into the charting. But let's just say Blue Beetle is not doing well for Warner Brothers. It will likely end up being yet another massive flop for them, despite the fact that percentage-wise, audience-wise, it's clearly resonating with some people. It just seems that the people it's resonating with are a very small group, and it's just very few and far between. Oppenheimer making another $9 million after 6 weeks of release. This film also doing well, right? The Barbenheimer effect is still clearly there, with them dropping very similar percentage-wise, and also still hanging out in quite a large number of theaters. This movie crossing $300 million domestic. Very, very impressive for this movie. Rounding out the top 5, we have TMNT, Mutant Mayhem. This film dropping 29%. Again, percentage-wise, clearly there is a market that is showing up for this movie every single week. It just does not seem like it is a vast, massive market, which is the reason why, box office-wise, I still think there's a good chance for it to end up being a, quote, flop, even though we're going to obviously see this film make a lot of money post-theatrical. And it's already making a lot of money because of the retail sales of the TMNT property itself. The Meg 2 has added quite a bit of money internationally, right? Domestically, this film is just not doing much of anything. $74.4 million at this point in time, starting to bleed theaters. So Warner Brothers is probably like, all right, we've pretty much made everything we could expect to make at this point in the domestic market. Internationally, they have a lot more people showing up for it, but still, roughly a third of its entire box office has come from just one country, and that is China. So even though we are looking at this film making profit, it is still a question, or rather I should say an asterisk next to that profit, because of the fact that they don't get 100% of those receipts from China or from any of the international markets for that matter, and their return rates in other international markets is a lot lower than it is stateside. So when you have a film that is that much higher as far as its international versus domestic, it means that you're not going to get as much money back as you would on a typical release. And so that's why we could on paper say that the film is a financial success. However, if you dive further into the numbers, it's likely not going to end up doing that well for Warner Brothers when everything is said and done. Strays in its second week of release has dropped 44% for a small film like this. That is just not good. This film is also looking like it'll be a flop as it costs a little bit more than what it probably should have. You also had 2 brand new films, Retribution. I believe that is the new Liam Neeson movie, so can't say I'm surprised to see that film open around here. He has an audience, it seems, but I just don't quite understand why they keep making at least what seem to be very similar movies, very similar characters that he happens to portray in said movies. But hey, if he's working and if you like him as an actor, hey, you probably enjoy all the films that he has coming out. But $3.3 million opening weekend, who knows what the actual budget for the film is. They tend not to release those things early on, but this is also a film because it's getting a limited release, and it's the kind of movie that it is. Probably won't end up tracking it, but again, we'll wait and see if they release any further numbers on it. Number 9 spot goes to another new film called The Hill. Don't know much about that one, $2.5 million. And lastly, rounding out the top 10, we have Disney's Haunted Mansion, which again, also bleeding some theaters here. Percentage-wise, not the worst that we've ever seen, but this film also going to end up being a box office flop. Also, someone did point out that apparently the numbers had a wrong metric for Mission Impossible. So it had said that it was dropping like 1,000 screens or something. That ended up not being true. Ultimately, though, the film is still seeing, again, strong holds down the stretch. Actually added another 72 screens, probably to try to take advantage of the National Cinema Day today. So we'll see if it's able to make a little bit of extra money because of that. But as I've been mentioning on all previous videos the last 6-7 weeks, it's just not likely going to be enough to help get its money back. Going into the individual releases, why do I have the flash up here? Get out of here. Oh, it's because the numbers over at my charting was not actually working. So let's go ahead, go back to where I'm supposed to be. There it is. Gran Turismo. So based on a true story, Gran Turismo. 17.3 million domestic. Again, not a terrible start. 53.8 million international, right? Worldwide numbers. Now, the one thing I have to add, the caveat I have to add is that going into the weekend, it was already at around $20 million international. So you're looking at it only adding another 10-14 million internationally. So an opening weekend of roughly around $30 million when you're not taking into account any of the early releases in those other countries. So not the worst start off in the world, but also not a great one either. This film is going to need a lot of good word of mouth and is going to be able to need that to be consistent through the course of its release if it's going to hope to get close to that break even, to that post-theatrical, being able to basically get close enough to rely upon that post-theatrical run that this film probably will end up having. It's not a movie that I feel the need to buy on 4K. It's not the movie that I feel like I'm going to need to have on physical media, though it is a film that I do think is worth seeing in theaters because I think it is a lot of fun. The Barbie film at $1.3 billion, as you can see, biggest film of the year. Again, if you're going to go ahead and say, well, officially it's not at this point, yes, you are technically correct. Super Mario Brothers is currently the king with $1.35 billion, but not a whole lot is separating them at this point. So really just a couple of days or so removed from Barbie officially crossing that $1.35 billion of Super Mario Brothers. And because it is still adding money, it's going to get to $600 million in the next couple of days domestically. It's going to get to $800 million by next weekend internationally. We're looking at, again, the biggest domestic and the biggest international release as far as films that are being released here in the States that we are going to get this year. I don't see any other film that is set to be released this year that's actually still getting a release because of all the strikes, getting anywhere close to this. And the fact that Barbie is now also in that discussion for being able to even catch up to a film like Top Gun Maverick from last year, I think that this is definitely, in the last couple of years, I think that this is again, another sign of just how powerful of a box office juggernaut that the Barbie film actually is. Let's hope that Hollywood does not take the wrong message from this film and think, oh, if we make more films with this kind of messaging, it's going to do well. Obviously, I hope that they recognize that it's because, no, it's the IP and it's being able to try to gear your film and IP towards an audience that typically does not have a lot of films that represent them, right? Just because you have, for instance, the Marvels coming out and it's a female-centric film focusing on female empowerment. Well, guess what? That is not what is selling the Barbie film. It is the IP and the fact that it is focused more so on just, again, female demographics. And so when you look to these numbers, hopefully they see and get the right message. We know Hollywood never gets the right message, never fully understands these things, but again, have to give kudos where kudos are due, and Barbie is a massive hit at this point in time. Can't say the same thing for Blue Beetle, though. At $81.8 million internationally after just 2 weeks of release, this film probably going to end up being a $100 million flop. Now, just a bit of a reminder that the budget going into the film, the estimated budget was $120 million. The director apparently came out to say it was closer to $100 million. When it comes to Warner Brothers and the fact that we just recently got word about how The Flash actually costs closer to $300 million, just tells me that they're probably not going to be very honest and forthright about how much this film actually costs to make. Based on the CGI alone, the CGI, though not great, was seemingly a lot better than what it was in The Flash. If you're spending that much money on The Flash, and you could argue it's because of reshoots and plenty of other things, I can't say that Blue Beetle, though, is going to be able to make a similar argument that it somehow saved money. And even if it did only cost $100 million, it's still going to end up being a $80 million plus flop. I mean, just not good at all. Warner Brothers in dire straits there. Oppenheimer getting close to $800 million internationally. TMNT at $135.1 million internationally. And again, this film cost $70 million to make, so it's at 1.9 times its budget. So to get to that 2.5 times the budget is still possible, but again, it seems that there is a lot more competition coming to this space. This film has only been almost out for an entire month, so I think it is starting to slow down. So it seems at the very least that this film getting its money back is not likely theatrically, but as I've mentioned previously, the toy sales alone is going to make them fine as far as an IP is concerned. The Meg, as I had mentioned also, at $352 million, look at that difference between the domestic and international. Right, on average, you're looking at studios getting somewhere between 50 and 60% of the box office, sometimes a little bit more, especially in the earlier parts of a release for a film, talking domestically. Internationally, on average, it's around maybe 40 to 50%. From China alone, it's only 25%. So that's what the studio gets from the box office of a given country. Seeing that China has making up over $100 million, so that's about a third of the entire box office, you can see why, even though on paper, the film has made a little bit of money, just take into account that one metric of China alone, not to mention the other international countries where the return is not going to be nearly as high as the domestic returns, that tells me that this film probably will end up still being a loss. But again, we'll have to wait and see if ever actual, financial data gets released to be able to confirm these things. Stray is the rated R film that I have no interest in, $21.3 million. Again, not a terrible number on paper, but the film costs a lot more than it should have. It costs in the $40 million range. So yeah, $46 million. So right now it's only made half its budget, and you need to make 2.5 to 3 times your budget to break even. So Stray's not looking good. As I said, Mission Impossible 551, definitely not looking all that great either. The difference is that this film is actually a really good film that anyone who has seen it will tell you it's a great film that you should go and watch and you should go and see. This is a film that's going to do well on 4K. It's going to do well on physical media. They're going to be able to sell some distribution rights for this movie when it comes to streaming, specifically internationally. So it's going to make some of that money back, but ultimately, whether or not it's going to be financially solvent, it's not looking like that's a possibility still. The new film with Liam Neeson, Retribution, $3.3 million. Again, take that for what it is. It is a Liam Neeson action film, at the very least. The Hill with Dennis Quaid and Colin Ford. I am assuming that this is some religious-based film or faith-based movie, it seems. Would have to be my guess. Yes, this is the one where someone has leg braces and then they receive a miraculous healing. Again, I think that those stories, real life stories, are great. The movies and the adaptations tend to not be all that good. So hey, 2.5 million is what it is. Haunted Mansion at 91 million internationally, and then Update on Sound of Freedom 181 million. So $200 million domestic is just not going to happen for this movie, but that doesn't really matter because on a $15 million budget, and seeing that the budget itself, right, was paid for by 20th Century Fox, and the actual rights to get the movie back from the director, rather by the director to get the rights back, was only about 5 million or so. Yeah, massive return, massive profits being made by both the director and by Angel Studios. Going to box office charting, because I love doing charting here over at OMB Reviews. As you can see, I am having some issues. So again, Mobile Command, I do appreciate you for helping out the other day, getting these import features there. But as you can see, right now we are having some import issues because obviously when it comes to the numbers.com, they tend to have a bit of an issue. So let's go ahead then and just go right into it, just so that way we can see the numbers for ourselves, and I will fix these issues later. We like doing things live here on OMB Reviews. That way you see exactly what's going on behind the scenes. So at $53.8 million, the film is right now $57 million in the red. So again, there's definitely a possibility for the film to make its money back, but it still needs to get to $150 million worldwide. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but hey, it could. Blue Beetle at 81 million, however, is not likely going to happen. So based on that number after 2 weeks, historically, most films at this point will make somewhere between $116 and $163 million. So not likely going to get to $200 million worldwide by the end of its run. And that means $109 to $81 million in the red. So even if the film only did cost $100 million, we're still looking at this film being closer to maybe, $50 to $100 million in the red. no matter which way you spin it, the film is going to be a massive loss for Warner Brothers. And I can't say that is all that surprising, seeing that the movie really isn't all that good. Now, I can already hear some people saying, yes, but it has not released in all of the international countries. Okay, that might be true, but if you're going to tell me that, oh, it's going to make a crap ton of money in Australia, which is not known for being a massive movie market, I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. If you're going to try and tell me that New Zealand is going to bring it back, I'm sorry. I'm here to tell you that that's just not going to happen. The one that always likes to get mentioned, because it's not even listed here, probably because, again, it's not going to be released until I think September or so, is Japan. People keep bringing that country up. It keeps getting delayed releases of some of these Western films, but Japan has not been showing up in the way that people have expected to. Even for the Super Mario Brothers movie, it did not show up the way that many people had expected. It made $100 million there, which is very impressive, but compared to other Western releases in that country, it's not the biggest. And especially if you compare it to just homegrown releases there, it's not even close. So people who keep trying to bring that country up as going to be the savior of Blue Beetle just don't actually pay attention to these numbers. The film is just, again, there's nothing to say and nothing to indicate that Blue Beetle is going to be fine. Again, the stronger than expected domestic hold is good, but it's just going to fall off a cliff very, very easily as that audience begins to dwindle. Strays as well, we can project to be a box office flop, going to be around a $50 million loss for that studio. The Last Voyage of the Demeter, we already talked about this last time, is still a flop. The Meg 2, $18 million right now as far as its total profits, but remember, asterisk next to those profits because it probably is still not making its money back simply because of most of that money coming from the China box office. TMNT, $135 million. Again, it's $23 million in the red, so it's looking like it's having a pretty average release. That's what that 70% is indicating. It means compared to its first 2 weeks. Right now, the first 2 weeks the first 2 weeks account for 70% of its entire box office. So that's about normal. It's about average for what these films will actually do. So the chances of it getting to its best case scenario of $8 million in the black, it's a possibility, but in all likelihood will still end up being in the red. But toy sales make that pretty much a moot point. Talk to Me is continuing to add to it. Again, I don't know if these numbers are exactly up to date because of the import issues that I'm having, but still adding nonstop profit. Haunted Mansion still a massive flop for Disney. Barbie at $1.3 billion, getting very close to being the biggest film of the year. Massive numbers, massive profits for Oppenheimer. Mission Impossible, as I mentioned, is around $100 million in the red, so it's looking like it's also still having a pretty average release, but it needs to do a lot better than that at this point in time if it had any hope to break even, and still that's not likely going to end up happening. And lastly, Sound of Freedom, as you can see, $86 million of profit there, again, based off of typical projections, and that's using also the typical break-even point, which means that those profits are actually, in reality, a lot higher because of the way in which they bought the rights back and distributed the actual movie itself. Kind of the main points of it all is that Gran Turismo, though, stronger than expected start, still has a long way to go. Blue Beetle, guaranteed another massive flop for Warner Brothers, likely close to $100 million. Terrible film, so it kind of deserves it. And then the rated R film Strays, also looking to be a flop, and just goes to show that, hey, adult audiences don't really want or desire those kinds of movies anymore. So those are the box office numbers as they stand. What are y'all's thoughts about these numbers? Let me know in the comment section down below. And also, do you think that Blue Beetle is going to be a $100 million flop? Do you think that we're going to find out other things about it? And hey, thoughts about Gran Turismo? It's a great film. You should go see it. Let me know your thoughts on that as far as box office is concerned as well. Anyway, smash that like button, loud that fire button, I see you smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a special shout out to all of my members at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above, starting off first with my members over on Patreon: Father Luca Illick, Hymir Irie Hymason, Garrett Searles, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange Chat Reviews, check out his YouTube channel by the same name, Laura, the Monomator General's Story, Rosetta Allen, check out her YouTube channel, Eagle Rider, and Miss Martin Muses, check out her YouTube channel by the same name as well. To my subscribe star peeps, Zion Voders, Matt317, check out his Twitch channel by the same name. Fast Reaction, The R, Mr. Roy, J-Rod, The Beer Guru, and ZK-Man, who you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. And lastly, to my locals members, Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, and Robert Barnes, the amazing lawyer. So thank y'all very much for being my supporters at the Keep It the Bifrost level and above. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, go ahead and check out that top link in the video description below to find out ways to sign up to support the channel and to be able to get access to things like the shoutouts, but also to giveaways. I have an exclusive giveaways channel on my Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff, and also access to an exclusive podcast that I do once or twice a month, depending on what I'm able to get accomplished, especially over the course of this crazy, crazy busy summer. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.